Welcome to the MLB portion of episode 2 of the DebateGate Sports Podcast. Glad to have you back. So, for those of you that have been living under a rock the past couple of weeks and don't know that baseball is back, it is. It is. And after weeks and weeks of debating and coming up with new plans and declining and arguing between the MLBPA and Robert Manfred, the MLB commissioner, they finally reached an agreement to set up a 60-game season that is going to start around the end of July and continue until the fall. There will be 10 teams in the playoffs. The players will make around 37% of their salaries, and every single team will have a designated hitter, even the National League teams. So, Josh, what do you think of this idea to bring baseball back?
It's simultaneously irrelevant and good. I'll talk about the second thing first because I don't know how to order my topics. But it's good because I like having the universal DH. I don't like the old heads being like, oh, it's strategy. Like, yeah, it's strategy to make it harder for one certain teams to score runs in comparison to others, which doesn't make sense to me. So I'm super glad that they brought the universal DH back. I'm glad that they came to agreement because, of course, we're sports fans, we're baseball fans. That's why we're making a podcast. And, you know, I like the 60-game season. I think the 60-game season will be good because it'll be shorter because I always feel like even though it's the, tradition of the MLB to have a really long season, which, by the way, I said that in air quotes, I think it does need to be shorter because, for example, the Cubs, I think it was last year, where they were first in the division by like 6 games, and then they had 42 games in 43 days and just ran out of gas. Like, that should not be happening, where you only have 1 day off from playing a professional athletic sport, even though some may argue this doesn't take a ton of, athleticism and whatnot. It still takes a lot of energy. And also, like, if you ask anyone, you are sore after a baseball game, especially the pitcher.
Oh, yeah.
How are you able to play 42 games in 43 days at the professional level? That's just insane to me. That should not be happening. So,
one thing I did want to bring up was I kind of have mixed feelings, and I like the shortened schedule because I think baseball had really a big decline in viewers and just like fan attendance overall, both watching and attending in person. And I think part of it, yes, has to do with the long schedule, which I think the long schedule is dumb in multiple ways. I agree with what you were saying, but what I was thinking was how one game doesn't have that much of an effect on the season. I know some people can say, oh, every game matters. 162-game season, every game does not matter. And I feel like we can argue that the NFL probably has the most viewers, one of the most, I would say, in American sports. It is the most. They also have the shortest schedule. Coincidence? I think not. Every game has a newfound importance in the NFL, where in the MLB it's just like another game. We have 161 more. So for me, I like the shortened schedule. Hopefully the ratings will get back up. However, the time and date that they want to start the MLB season totally conflicts with the NBA, totally conflicts with the NHL. If you're trying to get your ratings up and suddenly you're clashing with two other sports that people love to watch, possibly more than baseball, and throughout the summer, baseball struggles on its own in its own sport, but now you're clashing up against 2 other sports for almost the entirety of your season. How is that going to go? So I think that's what I wanted to say. Josh, you can continue.
So, as I was saying, I really like the shortened season, as you were just talking about here. I just think it'll help baseball's overall ratings and just make, the games matter more, and
yeah,
it's like I just think it'll help on all facets having a shorter season. It'll cause more tension and it'll cause a lost game. I've never been angry that a team has lost that the Cubs have lost a game because I'm a fan of the Cubs. I've never been angry that they lost a game unless it was in September. The only time. So it'll cause games to matter more, like you've said multiple times. And other things I like is, just in general that baseball is back, and that but as I said to my first point, which was I think it's irrelevant. That's because of the coronavirus and issues with baseball.
Yes, the coronavirus has taken a toll on baseball. The official numbers for coronavirus in the MLB is that there are 42 positive cases, which is actually significantly lower than the NBA. To be fair, MLB is a lot less contact, which I think is a definite positive. So maybe that can help with the NBA starts to struggle with coronavirus and baseball doesn't. That could be good for the MLB. Point aside, the MLB does have a plan to go about the coronavirus. They're going to be testing them nonstop, but they are also going to have designated like a coronavirus hotline with medical officials if someone does test positive. And I also do like that they're still playing in their own what do you call it? Arenas. Sorry, lost my train of thought there. They're going to play in their own stadiums, which I think is really good, especially for businesses outside of those stadiums, because who wouldn't still want to go to a sports bar and watch the game on TV? Josh, what do you think about how the MLB plans to handle the coronavirus?
The MLB plans seem like it doesn't matter either, because I was listening to Sports Talk Radio here in Chicago. As you can probably tell by now, we do live near Chicago because we're fans of all Chicago teams. And they were talking to Chris Bryant, and Chris Bryant was talking about how the plans were to get tested every other day, but he and every other player on the Cubs has only been tested once in 7 to 8 days. They said you'd get the results back immediately. They've been getting them for a couple of days. So it seems like the whole operation is a mess. And you did say that baseball is further away from each other. That is correct. That is why all of my other sports that I play have not been restarted, but baseball has. But the issue with professional baseball in the MLB is that you have so many bodies. You have so many bodies.
That is very true.
You have pitching coach, hitting coach, manager, equipment guy, ball boy. You have all these necessary people that have to be there in the dugout. If you ever watch an MLB game, there are at least 40 people in that dugout. That dugout is not whatever 40 times 6 is, 240 feet long.
Do you think they might make them wear masks in the dugout? Do you think that's a possibility if the cases do start to spike?
Players won't do that. As well as I think another issue is that they won't be in secluded bubbles like the.
Well, that's what I was going to say that next. How their environment is much different from the NBA's.
Like the NHL is in 2 separate bubbles, in Toronto and in Edmonton, and the NBA is just in Orlando. These teams aren't going anywhere. They're still going to be flying. So I personally think of all the leagues, this one has the least chance of actually starting because of the coronavirus.
Well, yeah, the MLB was also the last to get off the ground. They were arguing with trying to negotiate salaries and games with their commissioner. And when no one really thought that the season was going to happen, they were the last to kind of announce that there would be a baseball season. And yeah, but so far they do have less coronavirus cases. However, players have already started to complain. You mentioned Chris Bryant. I could definitely see more players following in his lead. And yeah, I guess we'll have to see how this goes. This is going to be very interesting, a very interesting short season of baseball. And I guess we'll just see how it goes. However, baseball is back, and we do want to get into the nitty-gritty with some of these teams, specifically our beloved Chicago Cubs. So, Josh, the Cubs have been kind of a sleeping giant of the MLB, and they've begun to flounder since their 2016 World Series title. It's starting to get worse and worse every year. How do you think they're going to bounce back after their playoff absence last year?
And so does my depression every time I talk about the Cubs. So when it comes to the Cubs, at least this year, I understand what the Ricketts were doing, but they were trying to save money 3 years down the line. Which, if you look at if you ask the basic MLB fan or the basic Cubs fans, they'll be like, yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. You want to save money as well as 3 years down the line. Rizzo's going to be out of a contract. Baez, Contreras, and Bryant in the next 3 years, as well as half your pitching staff, are going to be out of a contract. So, you need to save money for that time. But look at it realistically. Rizzo, Bryant, Contreras, and Baez are all top 3 at their position. I mean, obviously you can argue that. In my opinion, they're all top 3. None of them are first, I would say, but they're all top 3. And except Contreras. I personally would say Contreras is the best catcher in the MLB, but obviously I'm biased. Anyways, all of them, except maybe Rizzo, is going to be asking for at least $200 million. The Cubs, A, aren't going to be able to cough up that much money. B, aren't going to want to, knowing the Ricketts. So it's like your championship window obviously has a shutdown date, and that date is 2021. Next season or the season after, whatever, Baez and Contreras, they're the last 2 contracts that come up. Whenever those 2 expire, that's when it's done. That's when so you got to spend your money now, and you got to spend it wisely. That's the issue.
Yeah.
Spend it wisely.
Yeah, they have not spent it wisely, as almost immediately they let Cole Hamels walk out and enter free agency. And I guess I was thinking about this for a long time, who I would compare the Cubs to, and I finally found a team in the NFL that I would compare them to. I would say the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah,
and I know you can say, "Oh, well, Gavin, the Packers were 13-3, one went away from the Super Bowl. The Cubs didn't even make the playoffs." They're both in the same boat. Similarly, the Cubs are just a few years reserved. Both teams are in win now mode. We're going to stick with the Cubs, the Packers, whatever. Could care less about them. The Cubs are in win now mode. They have the talent. They had even more talent 1 year ago. Some of the pieces have started to fall off. Addison Russell, some of their pitching staff, their bullpen's a mess. Injuries. So they're already starting to regress. The championship window is closing. Now is not the time to prepare for the future. I have their offseason acquisitions. They have done very, very little except acquire prospects. They have a gaping hole at second base that they did very little to address. And
you just have a bunch of mediocre players there.
Exactly. Like I felt like last year they had guys that were like, they just had a bunch of like streaky guys, like even Nick Castellanos, who actually played really well for them. They let him go. They let Tony Kemp go. And I'm just like, I don't understand what they're doing. It's like the Packers drafting Jordan Love. Why would you prepare for the future? You get Aaron Rodgers, a bunch of wideouts to help you win that NFC Championship game. The Cubs are they have the same problems, and they've done little to improve, which to me is just so frustrating, except for their manager, who I think will improve, John Lester. But I don't think that's enough. They don't really have a designated ace, which I feel like you really need if you're going to be a playoff contender.
Kyle Hendricks can be that.
Kyle Hendricks can. He also can't. Yu Darvish was supposed to be that guy, and he was a disaster last year.
And
so I don't know. I want to have faith. I want to have faith with this new season. But Schwarber as well. Schwarber should be expecting some large sum of money as well, along with those other 4 that you mentioned. But
definitely. if he's able to continue
Mhm.
what he did towards the middle of last season.
So yeah, I need to see them improve their weaknesses. I really want to know what their plan is, because really I don't see one.
As being a diehard Cubs fan, this shows you how much this hurt me personally. Is that I completely forgot Nick Castellanos was a person. I blocked it out of my mind that he did not exist.
Do you remember he played for them last year, like in the second half
I
of the
know,
season?
I know who they are now, but I blocked him out of my mind because he was so incredibly good. If you look at his stats from the time he was on the Cubs and you average it to 62 games, it was something like 60 home runs, 80 doubles, a 330 batting average, like on base plus slugging of like 1,300 or whatever. It was insane numbers, like MVP numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even offer this man a contract.
Well, same thing with Cole Hamels. Cole Hamels kind of became that guy. I'm trying to remember. Did they sign him last year at the trade deadline? Or 2 years ago. So yeah, so they got him last year, and he was the one guy that kind of got sparked the fire in them. He just walks off like nothing happened. They're back at square one. Same thing with their bullpen. Hopefully Craig Kimbrell can kind of pick up some slack. He is getting well overpaid right now, but
he was literally hot garbage last year.
I forgot he'd even existed. I'm like, oh yeah, how much are we paying this guy again? Like,
oh yeah, casual 40-something million.
Exactly. I'm like, this guy was the top closer last year, and I thought about him maybe twice this season. But yeah, apart from the Cubs, hopefully
of course he's on the Reds. Sorry, I just looked up Nick Castellanos, and I was like, oh, of course he's on the Reds, Had to go to a division rival. Which, by the way, this year we have to beat the Reds. That's
the frustrating thing. Some of our division rivals have gotten better. The Cardinals, suddenly they made moves to fill their gaps. They're suddenly the favorite. The Reds were the joke of the MLB for quite some time now. Suddenly they're arguably in the same boat as the Cubs. They're improving rapidly. They have their core. They built around that core. And I don't know. It's a very even division. Apart from the Pirates, you have the Brewers, the Cardinals, the Reds, and the Cubs. And one of those teams is going to have to win the division. So the 60-game season, getting off to a good start and ending with a good ending with a bang is very important. So I'm excited to watch them, and hopefully they do very well.
I'm looking at the stats for Castellanos here. I'm sorry to keep bringing it back to that, but you literally just brought back my depression at how good he was and how we didn't even offer him a contract, and now he's on a Reds team that now is extremely promising.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
and I'm gonna butcher this name, but starts with an E and Suarez.
Eduardo Suarez.
Yeah. And then you have the Punisher, Alcides Alquino, I think his name is. And then, of course, you have Joey Votto if he can get back on his horse and be
Yasiel Puig.
Yasiel Puig's all right, but Castellanos.
He can be good. I mean, he's not the guy, but he's kind of streaky. Puig.
Yeah. Castellanos is the driver of this team. He brings in a lot of swag. He brings a lot of good plays, defensively and offensively, especially now that he's going to be playing third base, which I'm pretty sure was his natural position, but we put him in right, or the Tigers put him in right, so we decided to put him in right because we also had Chris Bryant. Speaking of Chris Bryant, and speaking of the Cubs continuously, this team can either be second in the National League and win the Central Division, or be last in the Central Division and be third to last in the National League.
I just don't know.
This team could win a World Series, but at the same time could be vying for the top pick in the MLB draft. It all depends on if Chris Bryant has another MVP season, if Javi Baez has another MVP season, if Anthony Rizzo keeps up what he does, if Kyle Schwarber decides to continue to increase, if Jason Hayward continues to increase, if Albert Almora and Ian Happ decide to actually be consistent, and then if Nico Horner can develop like he's supposed to be, then you have every position player as good. Our pitching, it can be good, it cannot be. Bullpen, that's going to be an issue. But if everyone hits the right stone, this team can win a World Series this year. Mm-hmm. At the same time, if none of them do good, we can be the first overall pick. But you may say, oh, yeah, that's right for every team. But all those teams at least have an idea where they can be. They have an idea where they can be. But for the Cubs, I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Brewers lineup, and they're kind of following like a similar thing. Like they have their guy in Yelich, and then they just kind of built around him with solid pitching. I shouldn't say solid. Decent, above average pitching, and then just sluggers around him with Ryan Braun, Keston Hiura, Lorenzo Cain, Eric Sogard. So they're still going to be a threat, like a middle of the pack type threat, depending on how they all play. So I definitely like what you said about how they could either be a contender or a basement dweller.
Speaking of which, I said the second best in the National League because who in the hell is gonna beat the Dodgers?
I mean, do they have a salary cap? Like, I'm just wondering how they're paying arguably top 5 MVP candidates at every position. I mean, it's like they're playing like MLB The Show Ultimate Team out here. You already had Evan Turner, and you go out and sign Mookie Betts.
Trade for him.
And you get David Price. And I don't know what they gave up to get those two guys.
They gave up first round picks and
MVP 2 years ago. And somehow they keep finding diamonds in the rough. They found Walker Buehler, who's better than Clayton Kershaw, probably going to win the Cy. He's my pick to He's my pick to win the Cy Young this year.
Same
personally.
Here.
I think he is just unreal. And they have one other guy. I can't think of his name right now. I want to say it's like Gavin something. But he was like, he came up from AAA and succeeded in the MLB. Got himself a nice starting role. And so it's just like, how? These guys have been so good for the past 10 years. It's like the Patriots, but they just keep adding like new young players every single year, and it's just amazing.
It's like, it's also insane how, they're just like, okay, so we have one of the strongest outfield cores, with Jock Peterson in center, who's a decent center fielder to above average center fielder, fringe all-star player. And then we have arguably the best player in the MLB in Cody Bellinger. And let's just add another best player in the MLB in Mookie Betts. It's just incredibly insane at how they're able to do this. And I just, if you don't win a championship this year, I swear, just blow it all up and get rid of the Dodgers as a club. Like, if you don't win the World Series this year, I don't understand how you're going to win a World Series ever again. You have one of the greatest pitchers of all time on your staffs in Clayton Kershaw.
And he's not even the ace. He's not even the ace, and he can win.
He's probably not even top 2. There's that one not Alex Wood, but something like he caught.
Rich Hill.
I don't know his name.
They still have Rich Hill and one guy from South Korea.
No, Hyun-Jin Ryu. He's in Toronto. He signed with Toronto.
He signed with Toronto.
Correct.
Okay, my bad.
But they had a backup guy. I'm trying to remember his name, but he took the ball and he cocked it way back, like behind him, and then threw it. He like fully extended his arm down. You're gonna have to look up. I'm gonna have to look up the pitching staff, but he's a good pitcher. Then you have arguably
they added David Price, and you still have your lights out closer in Kenley Jansen as well.
who wasn't lights out last year, but he can be.
I mean, he's still
really good. He's still good, but at the same time, he's not as good as he used to be.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be real interesting.
I would say in the AL, obviously the favorites would probably be New York or Houston.
Yeah.
Houston, when we were talking about brief MLB talk earlier in the week, I personally had completely forgotten about the Houston Astros scandal, which was pretty amazing, honestly. I just totally forgot it had even happened in regards to whatever's happened in 2020. Like one of the biggest scandals in baseball history, in sports history, just totally slipped my mind. But I wanted to bring up one thing about that because we've never talked about this Astros cheating scandal where they banged on the trash cans to anticipate pitches. I never understood why the players didn't get any punishment compared to the management that was involved, because it was a pretty player-based operation, I think we can both say. But it was really the management and Astros staff that went on to become managers for other teams that really got the shaft as compared to the players who didn't get fined, didn't get suspended, did get threatened by Aroldis Chapman on Twitter, yes. But no serious punishment from the MLB. What are your thoughts on that?
That's just insane. Insane and insanely disgusting. I mean, like, of course the media ate this all up back when spring training was actually a thing and when, media could talk to players in real life. They asked them all about it. They were like, asked all the pitchers. I'm pretty sure it was 100%. Like, they compared it, of course, to the steroid scandal of the late 90s, early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And it's just insane because every pitcher in the MLB that I know of that got interviewed always said, we'd rather them be able to hit the ball 800 feet and destroy it and hit the ball like 200 miles an hour off the bat, have the exit velocity, in 200 miles an hour, than for them to know what pitch is coming. So it's insane at how absolutely zero of the players got a punishment. Where like players who, from players said weren't cheating as bad as this Astros team where nothing has come of it, players have been banned from their organizations. Sammy Sosa, players have been banned from the Hall of Fame. Barry Bonds, it's like those players are getting restricted, but these players aren't. It just makes zero sense to me. It's complete mishandling of the situation. It shows how truly awful Rahm Emanuel is at his job.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And the sad thing is the evidence is there. Like, I don't know what they're going to say. Oh, yeah, we can't prove it. Just go on YouTube. The evidence is there. There was one video where I literally laughed out loud because it was Jose Altuve hitting a walk-off. And when he's rounding third base, about to jump on everybody, he says, "Don't take off my jersey. Don't take off my jersey," which is what literally every single MLB team does to the player that hit the walk-off, you can say. And he was asked about it because people were assuming that he had like a microphone or whatever in his jersey. And at first he was like taken aback and he's like, "Oh, what?" And the reporter's like, "Oh, how come you didn't want the jersey taken off?" He's like, oh, my wife doesn't like it," and laughs nervously. I mean, come on. Like, really? I don't know. I think it's totally insane that they didn't get any sort of punishment. It kind of makes me mad that, like, okay, that the management got a large punishment. They all got fired from their jobs, which I don't know. I'm no MLB commissioner, but I think that something definitely should have come. The players definitely should have paid for what they did. And it's funny that they didn't even win the World Series when they literally could tell what pitch was coming.
Definitely, that was just insane. The whole situation is awful, and this will cause another recession in the number of fans and viewers per video.
Definitely. Yeah, they are still probably them with the Yankees are still the favorite to win the AL. Anyways, guys, that will be it for the MLB portion. We will be covering the NHL's playoffs very, very soon. So stick around, and we'll be right back.